Good evening to you. Professor Jen here in the background. All you hear is a voice. And of course, my dearest friend and colleague in this whole crusade and understanding the issues, Melanie Blow, here again with us tonight. And tonight's discussion is going to be the aftermath of what happens after people disclose what has happened to them, after sexual abuse, etc. And before we begin, I'd like to thank Captioning Services here at RIT for closed captioning everything for us, as we certainly couldn't do this ourselves. We're just panning the living room here. And so, you know, it's a low-budget show, and we do what we can. So I'll give a quick hello. Hello. We'll go back to Melanie, my star person this evening, as usual. And I thought I would start this evening out as we're talking about things especially that happen to women and women's issues, but certainly the things that we discuss also happen to men, and much more frequently than we often admit in our culture and society. Wouldn't you say that's true?
Oh, absolutely.
Very true.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And what I wanted to first start off with is something called the aftermath. And for those of you in prostitution and vice, women in crime, domestic violence, seminar on sexual violence, we talk very often about, you know, helping victims. We talk from the criminal justice perspective, what it is we need to do in law enforcement, what we need to do with caseworkers, and we always talk about helping the victim. And we've saturated a lot of the market and the commercial academic market with how to help victims. There are textbooks, there are workshops. I mean, Melanie and I could stand here and we could talk about all of these different materials and videos and conferences. And the bottom line is there's a dirty little secret in all of this, and it's called not everybody wants to deal with a survivor after they have disclosed what has happened to them. And very often, it's their family who really doesn't wish to have them disclosed. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about myself, and then my dear friend and colleague here, Melanie, is going to share a little bit about what happened to her after she started to speak. And then I thought I'd offer you some very brief scenarios from my case management over the 20-something years that I've been doing this. And then, of course, you can draw whatever conclusion you'd like. So I'll just briefly begin. Tonight's lecture cast is probably going to run about 20-25 minutes, as we both are aware that it's very depressing topics, and we're sorry that they are, but that's how it is. So what had happened to me was when my stepfather first started with me, I really was a little on the confused side with the sexual abuse, because at first it really wasn't sexual abuse. It was something we called grooming. For the captionist, I'll spell it Grooming. And now that I look back and I'm 50 years old and I have children of my own, I realize that my stepfather sort of targeted me and picked me out and planned on carrying out his plan for what he referred to as a relationship with me, which somebody who's 11 really doesn't make decisions about relationships with grown men. But, and this went on for quite some time. And interestingly enough, during the course of my abuse, this probably won't surprise Melanie at all, but in my family system, other people did know, because I did disclose. And I'll tell you, Melanie, and for our students that are listening to us, there were two specific occurrences that happened in my abuse that I can honestly say to you I distinctly remember disclosing. I remember I had said to my mother that I was concerned about birth control because I saw the direction that things were going with my stepfather. And I remember mentioning that I was highly concerned about not having birth control. And I was greeted very negatively. Aside from the fact that what I was also saying is that this person is attacking me, I was also negatively treated with the birth control discussion. And in fact, the strangest thing had happened, and you know, in this business, we speak very candidly, so I never apologize for anything that's on a lecture cast, because this is really where you learn the business. When I was about 13 years old, I started to menstruate. And I had said to my mother, who at the time was 40, because there were 27 years between us, I had noticed that there weren't any products in the house.
Mm.
And I assumed that my mother must have gone through her changes. And I said to my mother, I'm going to need some products. Now, this is very interesting, Melanie, and tell me what you think about this. And I had said to her that, I had entered this new phase in my life, which is, purely normal maturation. And I was greeted with a lot of anger. I was greeted with a lot of resentment over menstruating. I was greeted with this most peculiar attitude that included, you can't keep the products in the bathroom because your stepfather might see them and it's impolite. Now, meanwhile, this is juxtapositioned against the fact that I've already disclosed to her that he's inappropriate with me and I was concerned about birth control. Here we are in 2014. I have a husband that buys products. I know of other men that buy products for their daughters. It's a health issue. It's not a sexual issue. But I think what had happened with my mother, and she's not here to defend herself, she passed away in 2000, I think what had happened is that she saw me as the enemy. And I now became the competition. Even though I was the victim, Mel, I think she saw me as the competition. And therefore the menstruating and the discussing of the abuse, she was clearly rejecting what was happening, but she was also rejecting me because she was very angry that she was now in competition with this person in her house. What is your professional and peer opinion of anything that I've just said to you?
It's not unheard of.
Really?
Yeah, no, that's not the first time I've heard of something like that. It is, mothers are sometimes jealous of the attention, the sexual attention that their daughters or stepdaughters or whatever
Or
are getting.
sons.
Yeah,
Or sons,
yeah,
right.
exactly. I'm just trying to get in the frame a little bit. I have heard of that, and obviously that's not healthy, that's not desirable, but it's not unheard of. And
I think it depersonalizes, this is my opinion, because I've come to terms with it, I think it depersonalizes the victim. It removes them from any aspect of humanity. And I think it's hard then for family members to see that victim as a victim, and they don't wish to see them as a victim. Interestingly, I had announced to my entire family as I got older, as I became more comfortable with myself, that this abuse had occurred. And I can tell you that as of this date, I have family members that do not wish to speak with me. They feel as though I should have just let it go and not said anything. I had one cousin actually have the nerve to say to me, "Why did you have to say anything? You ruined our memories of our childhood." I said, "Well, your childhood and my childhood were very different. Pretty different."
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of students out here in Lecturecast land must be wondering, why are these two women laughing about this? Because it's such a serious issue, but we've come to terms the best that we can.
Absolutely. And it becomes, it's a part of your life.
It
and
is.
You can't, I don't think it's healthy, and I mean, I've tried this, but I don't think it's healthy to just have part of your life that you can't talk about, you can't, you can't acknowledge, you can't use it in any other context, you can't let anybody else see it or experience it, which isn't to say I go to Wegmans and I talk about being an incest survivor left and right, because that's not really healthy either. But yeah,
it's part of our lives.
Right.
I mean, look
it's
at
a
it.
huge part.
It's a huge part. Look at it this way. It's like saying to a prisoner of war, somebody that comes back from the military, look, I'm sorry you did 4 years overseas, but we're not going to talk about it. You're going to disboard that plane.
Right.
You're not going to go to an absorption center. You're not going to go to any kind of a hospital to get any kind of PTSD. We're just going to cut you back out into the community, and we just want you to act normal. And even though you feel like you're dying inside, we want you to just get on with things. And in fact, do us a favor and don't discuss anything that went on for the last 4 years, because you're going to ruin the party for everybody else.
Right.
Nobody would say this to a soldier. Why would anybody say this to a survivor of incest and sexual abuse? Because unfortunately, our society has made it very easy to overlook people like us, and it's almost provided a comfort in, I don't know, in a strange way. It's like you become isolated even in your adulthood after you become victorious in saying, this is what happened to me. Maybe this would be a good point in time, if you feel comfortable, Mel, sharing with us what had happened to
Okay,
you.
absolutely. Okay, when I was 13, I was raped by my father. And I think the first thing any student should realize about that is that that's not the kind of thing you get up and walk away from and immediately think, you know what, I'm now a victim of a crime, I need to go call the police and do something about this. It's something you try to survive moment by moment, and then it is something that you try to survive by not experiencing. And that's, I mean, I remember afterwards going and taking a shower, going to bed. The sun wasn't set yet. This was in May. 13-year-olds don't normally go to bed early. I mean, that's kind of part of the
Universal.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Universal.
Yes, you've raised up a couple of them. You know this. But you try. You can't deal with it. A child. I mean, 13. That's an old-ish child. I mean, I was in 8th grade. It's not something. Even when you're 13, it's not something you can deal with rationally.
No. If you don't mind me asking, you talk about the shower. I remember when my abuse first started, and I just remember, and I just remember it so distinctly about the showering, and then I got to a point where I was taking 2 and 3 showers a day. And then in my case, and I don't mind disclosing this at all to students, I was changing my underwear constantly. Did you have any of these symptoms, or did it come out in other ways?
What happened with me afterwards was, again, it didn't happen right away, as I recall, although it wasn't the kind of thing I'd marked on my calendar either. I got to a point where I couldn't sleep in pajamas. I'd have to sleep fully dressed. I got to a point where I had trouble sleeping in bed. I would want to sleep on a chair or on the floor or something.
Right, where you felt less vulnerable.
Right, exactly. Now that, you can do what you want to do when you're a teenager and you're living in your own house and nobody really cares what's going on anyway. When you get to college, all of a sudden, this becomes kind of an issue.
Did you realize it was an issue until you saw other people that were
Nope.
peers? And that's exactly...
That was my first night.
Yes.
My first freshman night in college. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? I'm like, because I wanted to fit in. I really wanted to fit in. I wanted to be normal. I didn't want anyone there to know
what had happened.
Right. So I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a lot of work.
Isn't that something that it came out when you started to see your other peers and your cohorts acting what you thought was normal and rational, which is, people usually do sleep in a bed. I mean, this, it's what it is. Unless you want to hang upside down in a closet like a bat. But I had a similar issue happen to me, and again, I don't mind discussing this, where I had now follow me here. I'm now 50, but because of Facebook and because of technology, I have some old boyfriends that I had from when I was younger. And they had remarked over the years, they were surprised I had 5 kids, and they had remarked that they were surprised they taught criminal justice. And, it's just when you get to be my age and you haven't seen people in 20, 30 years or even longer, you don't even really know who you're talking to anymore on Facebook. It's a new acquaintance. But the few boyfriends that I had from that period of my life all said to me, because they had experience now too, either they've gotten married to other women or men. Some of my former paramours, have different sexual preferences now. But they all said the same thing to me. They said, Jen, now that I've had daughters of my own, or now that sexual abuse is so prevalent in our society and people are discussing it, they said, I'm sorry I didn't know enough to address with you what was going on. So here now, I'm 50, in dialogue with boyfriends that I had from the past that I never told them what had happened to me, but they now realize certain behaviors I had. Like I would go to bed, let's say with a boyfriend, and I couldn't get fully undressed. I didn't like that feeling of being extremely vulnerable. There were other behaviors that I guess I won't disclose because nobody needs to have nightmares of Professor Jen in her most intimate moments, but there were other behaviors, I guess, that they had all said to me that I would do, that they said that they now realize as adult men that are married to other women or men, or that they have children of their own, they now realize what I must have suffered. And it's almost like a relief, because I found that strangers can be kinder than your own family.
Absolutely.
Isn't it the crazy?
Oh, yeah.
So could you speak to us a little bit about this?
Okay, a little bit. Well, I wanted to kind of go and kind of talk about what the goal of what we're going to talk about tonight. So, okay, I was raped by my father when I was 13. I didn't tell my family about that. I did not. About 6 months later, it happened in May, September, 6 months, I think. This uncle of mine, he wasn't my father's brother, he's my father's cousin, but we'll call him an uncle because it's much easier that way, who don't think I'd ever met at any point in my life, came over to visit. And the first time he was over, someone told me to help him take his suitcase into the guest wing, the guest apartment of the house. We had like a in-law apartment on our house. And I brought the suitcase over, and he kind of cornered me and would fondle me through my clothes.
Right.
And so this guy started coming over, and he had never been over at any point. And then this guy all of a sudden is visiting every couple of months. And every single time he's molesting me. And every single time it was getting more and more intense. And just like you said, I got to a point when I realized, we were going to need birth control very soon. And
can you imagine that a victim of a crime, I just have to stop us both, that a victim of a crime who's a teenager has to then concern themselves with extremely adult circumstances, and then somehow or another, here you and I have only really become acquainted professionally in the last half year, and we've never had this discussion before other than live here on this lecture cast. And so many other victims say the same thing, that there's an extra burden that people don't understand when you're a victim, that you have to concern yourself with your own health care, your own mental health care, the use of birth control. This is a lot to ask of a victim, Mel.
Yeah.
This is
absolutely
a lot to ask of a victim.
Yes, it is.
So you started concerning yourself with this.
Yeah, so I was worried about it, but I grew up in an extremely small town, an extremely rural place. So this was not easy. There were no corner stores to walk to for condoms. There was there was a grocery store and a pharmacy in town, and only a few of those in the whole county. So this is quite a challenge. But anyway, so Uncle's visiting regularly every couple of months. Things are, every single time there, and he would stay for a couple of. It was really
brutal.
It was, and the one thing was, unlike some survivors, he wasn't living there 365 days a year. But
still, what's the difference? In survivor land, time is a funny marker because, like in my situation, it was 365 days a year, 7 days a week. But quite frankly, when you're in a criminal, when you're the victim of a crime, it doesn't matter if it's once a month. I don't think one is worse than the other, because at that point, when you become a victim, especially at such a young age, time doesn't even come into the equation because you're so numb.
Yeah, in a lot of ways.
You're just so numbed out.
Yeah, in a lot of ways I agree with that.
Yeah, that the time is sort of irrelevant.
Yeah. And so,
So do you think your father invited him over?
you know, I don't know. I don't know.
Because that's sort of
It is what it
it
sounds
sounds
like.
like, because it sounds to me, and I say this to you gently, it sounds to me like you're also not only a victim of incest and sexual abuse and assault and rape, but also you're a victim of human trafficking, because that is the definition.
Yes.
Because in the human trafficking definition, which I'm not prepared to discuss tonight, maybe I'll discuss it another time. My stepfather also put me in a position with his brother and with another cousin that it was a human trafficking circumstance.
Yeah. And I do realize that is probably what happened. And it was not, it's funny, it's like as an adult, and I've kind of been, I, I started dealing with it one piece at a time and one piece at a time. And at first it was the uncle and the whole, everything that went on with the rest of my family, which I'm going to get to shortly. Then I was able to deal with, the rape of my father as well. And then, within the last couple of years, as I learned about human trafficking and learned about the dynamics that happen in that, it occurred to me, this really is what this sounds like. Did money trade hands? I don't know. Knowing my father, I would honestly not at all be surprised.
Is he still alive?
My father is still alive. My uncle is not.
And do you have any relationship with your father?
I do see him a little bit. I do keep in touch with him largely because I know that he's still molesting children, and I want, if I ever get a chance, to throw a crumb to the police, and I am in contact with the police when I know something specific and worthwhile. I do keep in contact with them to the extent. So
can you imagine the job of the victim then morphs, because I'm in the same situation with my stepfather, though I have no contact with him. I feel like I'm always watching him, because I'm convinced, and I have my reasons, that I'm convinced that he has found other victims.
Yeah.
Because they don't stop, it's like a potato chip. They don't stop at one. At least we can laugh about this. It's gallows humor. But this is how we cope, But it's, I look at my situation and I know for a fact, because it was validated for me by other family members, when it was happening to me, they knew. And money was changing hands, and so was other things. Mink coats and trips and vacations. And did you feel that at the time this was happening to you, that other family members knew what you were going through at the time?
Ultimately, they found out. And what happened was, by this point I was 16. And my uncle and his wife and his kids, he had twins who were a year older than me. And my little sister, my parents and my little sister and I were all trying to watch TV in the same room. And I guess I was the last one to get into the room, and my uncle started saying, "Oh, come on, sit on my lap." I'm 16, he's not Santa Claus, okay? This is, And then he was so brazen and just so realized that nothing was going to happen to him. He felt entitled to start having
And his wife said nothing.
His wife said nothing.
And your mother said nothing.
My mother said nothing.
And now I just like to stop you here. Do you feel, because I'm going to just speak for myself, I feel let down not just by my stepfather, but I feel even more let down by the women that were in my life, that they didn't protect me.
That has been something I've had so much more, this caused me so much more pain.
Oh, congratulations. Welcome to the club.
Yeah, oh, exactly.
No, really, I never thought in a million years that my own mother, my own grandmother, my own aunt would sell me out.
Yeah.
But apparently I wasn't worth very much, or rather, maybe I was worth an awful lot to them, and so I was a commodity that was easy to be traded.
Right.
And I'm sorry this happened to me, and I'm sorry this happened to you.
And I mean, thank you. And I'm sorry it happened to you as well.
Sorry.
And it's life, and we're talking about it in the hopes of getting a generation of police officers and everybody else, arming them to have a better idea of how to fix this.
Now, now that we have this in this very personal context, can you honestly see in my line of work how I have all these clients that are prostitutes, that 99% of them have been sexually abused by a family member?
Absolutely.
Because it sort of like lays the foundation for, look, your family didn't think you were worth anything. They sold you out, right?
Yep.
And then they got money for you. So therefore, if your own family can throw you out of the comfort and insulation that you feel that you are deserving of, then what do you care if you sleep with half of Monroe County for money? What's the difference?
Well, let me tell you a great story. When I was, let's see, and I do want to, just have kids realize. I mean, my parents found out that one day that stuff was going on with my uncle, and it started out, he was asking me to sit on his lap. He proceeded to basically admit to everything he'd been doing. He talked about how much he wanted to have intercourse with me.
Like a relationship.
Yeah. He said some things that made it very clear. He had a very intimate knowledge of my body. All of this in front of his wife, in front of my mom.
And the wife, we want to know. We all want to know. I'm going to ask. We all want to know. And his wife's look on her face, since apparently she says nothing, what is the look?
It was just stone. Everything. And this is, oh my God, this is really almost more nightmarish for me than any of the actual abuse. But I just remember looking around that room and looking at my mom and my father and my sister and my aunt and her kids and everybody, and just looking into everybody's eyes.
And you saw nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw nothing.
And remember, students, Mel and I have not rehearsed this dialogue. We have not.
God help you, right?
Yeah, God help you, we did. But it's the same thing I had. They get like this empty, hollow, non-human look in their eye where you almost would swear they were all checked out and they're having a seizure. And they're not with us. It's like they've just like all like disassociated so much, not from the circumstance, in my case, but from me, that I was no longer human. And therefore, I was just, I don't think of myself this way anymore. But maybe I was just such damaged goods that it just didn't matter.
Yeah. But no, and you started talking about prostitution and how it's so easy for me to wrap my mind around this. I did very well in high school. I think it was something I could do well, and so I did. And so I finished high school and went to college. College was great. College, you don't get raped all the time, and there's all this, people treat you decently, and it was a big experience for me. And my junior, like the first 2 years I did come home in the summer. Every break I kept trying to figure out a way to not go home, and I mostly managed. I would take classes over Christmas vacation. Right. I had friends who let me stay with them, older friends who had apartments and stuff.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, and
I made sure to disappear.
Yeah. And between my junior year and my senior year, I was renting an apartment, and the landlord said I could move in over the summer. I found 2 jobs. One of them was a work-study that was tied into my financial aid, and the other one was I was working with brain-damaged men who experienced traumatic brain injuries. And I'll never forget the job interview. They bring me in, they're like, okay, now some of these men, like, just for attention, they'll do things like they may run out of their bedroom naked. Right,
or pull out their penis.
Or they may touch you on your butt.
Oh.
Are you going to be okay with that? And what was going through my head was, I'm going to get paid $8 an hour, which back then that
A
was
lot
about,
of money.
yeah, it was. Back then that was about minimum wage plus 40%.
Easy.
So that was pretty good.
Mhm.
I was going to get paid $8 an hour to have strangers do stuff to me that was a whole lot less horrible than what family had been doing to
And
me.
you get the
Sign
sympathy.
me up!
And you get the sympathy of a supervisor saying, "Gee, I'm sorry this happened to you, and what can we do to help you through this before you leave work?"
Yeah, I didn't even realize I was going to have that at that point. But I was just like,
congratulations.
sign me up. And what was really funny was that they put me in with the guys who were all into exposing themselves and butt grabbing and all that because I didn't flinch. I was actually very good with them. They got along very well with me and vice versa. And I'd learn to do things like make them walk ahead of me and things like that. Things
So
that I learned
so you would
living
have
at
the
home.
control.
Right, exactly. And it was fine. I mean, I really...
You could take actual charge over the situation.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but, I mean, that was... I mean, I still remember that job interview and that thought going through my head. And I knew not to say anything because I knew I wanted this job very badly. It occurred to me after I was thinking that, I'm like, you know, I don't think most people think this way.
Right, it's true.
I really don't.
No, most people, to be honest with you, I think most neurotypical, which it's a nice way of saying normal, and adjusted persons who have never experienced this don't think in those terms.
Yeah.
I mean, people like us do think in those terms because we've been trained to think in those terms.
Right.
But it is crazy.
Yeah.
Is your mother still alive?
Yeah, she is.
And
it's hard. It's taken me, like I said, it's taken me a very long time to come to terms with the fact that I'm never going to have an emotionally valuable relationship with her. Let's see, we have had, the FBI has been over to my father's house a couple of times for child pornography charges, which he apparently is always able to, I don't know.
somehow he does it.
Somehow, yeah, somehow
I'm
he
going
does
to tell
it.
you how I think he does it, and I don't know your father. I did not know this. But I can tell you from being on the task force here in Monroe County, sometimes it's just not in the county's budget to prosecute people for child pornography. And I'm not giving that as an excuse. I'm just offering a simple explanation. I know here in Monroe County, in Rochester, child pornography is not on the list of things that they're going to spend money to prosecute because it costs too much money. And they want to get the big guys or the big gals. They want the big drug cases. They want the big cases. And so, yes, in answer to your question, you wonder how, the answer is the money just isn't there to go after this.
Well,
and it's very, very
interesting to
frightening.
know.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm the one that had to tell you because we're friends.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to know. What was I going to say?
But your mother's aware he does all this.
She is.
So what is the deal with her? Do you think she was ever abused?
I know that she was.
Aha!
Actually, yes. I know that she was.
By who do you think?
A priest.
So do you think maybe she's gotten to the point where she's numbed out? I'm not making an excuse for
Yeah,
your mother,
I almost think it's a validation thing. I almost think it's like saying... Because she will always, if there was a story on about child sexual abuse or something like that on TV, she's very minimizing it. Always minimizing it.
I had the same thing.
Would always say, oh, you know, what, it happened to me, I'm fine. Well, my mother is one of the least fine people you're ever going to meet in your life. But she, you know, she doesn't want to think that way, so she doesn't.
She's going to negate, because I had the same thing happen with my mother. I think what happens is they don't want to face what happened to them.
Right.
So what they do is they minimize and negate then what happens to the victim. And it's called, well, I'm fine, you're fine. I toughed it out, you'll tough it out.
Right.
And that's not exactly what happens to people. They just become destroyed slowly over time.
Yeah.
You know? Very interesting. Your parents are alive, whereas both my parents are dead. My biological father, that is. My stepfather's still alive. But when my mother died, she had asked me for her forgiveness, literally on her deathbed. She started this with me on a Sunday. And I told her flat out I couldn't forgive her.
Mm-hmm.
And so at least I had that validation that she was acknowledging, you
Yeah.
know. It wasn't like she was in denial till the end. And then I said to her, I said, Carol, that was my mother's name. I said, Carol, I said, if you're waiting for me to forgive you, it's going to be a cold day in hell. Those are my exact words as she was dying. I said, because I can't do it. I said, I'm a mother of 4 children. At the time I had 4 kids. I said, I can't understand what was going through your mind. Now, she was really on her way to dying because she died that following Thursday. And she said to me, well, she said, Jennifer, you have to understand. And I said, understand what? She said, I did the best that I could, and I had to take care of my needs. I said, but Carol, you threw me to the wolves, and this, like, literally destroyed a piece of my life and a piece of who I am. And she was just she was very, very businesslike about the whole thing, very removed, very cold, reptilian. And my parting words to her, because I knew at that point the social worker had told me I would never see her again alive if I left that room. And I was coming back to Rochester. My mother died in New York City. And I turned around and I said, Carol, and I did say this to my mother, I said, I guess this is goodbye. And I gave her a kiss on the cheek, but it was like I had like a nauseous feeling when I said goodbye to her. Not that I knew that we'd never see one another again in this world, in this life, but I had sort of felt that same little childlike resentment towards her that she never protected me.
Yeah.
And it was almost like I gave her an obligatory kiss. I don't really think I felt much. It was something I guess one does out of habit or just, they just do. And I just remember walking away and that was, I didn't even look back. I wished her well. I thought to myself, I do remember thinking in the hospital, in the elevator, I thought to myself, gee, if there is a God, maybe this will be quick and she won't suffer.
Yeah.
But that was it. And then literally that following Thursday, that was a Sunday, on Thursday she died. And I felt sort of relieved that that part of my life was over, believe it or not. How do you think you'll feel about your mother's departure when the time comes? Or you haven't even thought of that yet?
No, I have. A couple years ago, she has diabetes. A couple years ago, I got this frantic phone call from my sister when I was at work saying, your mom is in a coma. And so I'm like, I mean, my sister was really upset.
And she's a younger sister.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I do everything I need to do to get out of work, and I'm driving down, and I'm filling my car up with gas, and I'm thinking, well, what route is going to be a better one? And at one point, I'm driving there, and I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not feeling anything? Like, emotion, there was just absolutely nothing was going on. I'm like, why is that? And then I was thinking about it more, and I think my sister noticed it too, and I'm just like, well, it's because there's nothing here emotionally, and it's very hard, and it's, students should know this. No matter how bad your parents are to you, there's no one thing they're ever going to do that makes them stop being your parent. That relationship is always there. When you are a kid, you need your parents. You need parents. That's the way psychologically children are. That's the role children fulfill in our world. They need people to take care of them. No matter how bad your parents are to you, they're still your parents. There may be hatred there. There may be rage there. There may be terror there. But there's still that desire for love and all of that emotional stuff.
The phantom parent. It's like it's like in my case, I had the parent I was given, but then there was always that hope, sort of, I think in the back of my mind, that I was going to have like this ultimate parent that was supposed to emerge from someplace.
Yeah,
like all of a sudden, pardon my English, act fucking normal for 5 minutes, have a normal parent that had normal concerns. So I guess that hope was always there when my mother was alive. But then when she passed away, and I've had a lot of time to think about my situation, I now realize at 50 that person was never going to emerge because she just didn't have it.
Right. And that's one of the things in my adult life I've just had to realize is just, it's I'm not gonna, this is not gonna happen. I'm never gonna have a good relationship with
Or any
either of these
relations.
people.
How can you?
Yeah, and I mean, I do, for this, for the sake of being polite, I'm not 100% estranged, but
Can you imagine how many other crimes people would sit here and say? I'm not judging you and I'm not judging me, but think about what we just both said. For the sake of being polite, can you imagine how many other crimes would you go and kiss the person goodbye on their deathbed?
yeah,
I mean, if a
yeah,
man or a woman just that I didn't know from a hole in the wall assaulted me, would I go in the courtroom and give them a
yeah.
kiss goodbye at the end of the trial? I mean,
It's
think
funny.
about
I
it.
never thought about it that
If it
way,
was
but
a
you're right.
stranger, would you say, gee, Jen, I want to go back to my attacker and be at least polite.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're
but you
right.
see how conflicted victims are
Right,
of family
right.
circumstances.
And like I said earlier, no kid, when they are raped by a parent, there's no kid who is like, I'm going to go call the police right now.
Well, look
And
at it in religious terms. In my religion, being Jewish, we're really screwed because why? It starts with the Ten Commandments. What's the very first
honor thy
commandment?
father
Mother
and
and
thy
thy
mother.
mother.
Yep.
So the minute you read that and you get this drummed into you, not that I'm saying religion's a bad thing. I did not say that. But I think religion's a very good thing. In my case, I think it saved my life. But here you're drummed into this with these commandments from the very beginning. Well, while you have that etched into your brain, how do you call the police on your own parent?
Right.
I mean, it's almost like impossible.
Yeah. And I mean, with me, ultimately, and as agonizing as this was, it probably helped me fast forward through a lot of steps. But ultimately, I realized I had to start working with the police when it became apparent my father was molesting more kids. There were 2 calls about child pornography. Those got investigated. And then when I was 24, right after I became too old to press charges. And this is a really uncommon wrinkle in the story, but in most survivor stories in New York, where New York, after your 23rd birthday, you cannot press charges. I graduated from college when I was 21. I got a job, I had an apartment, I was living with a guy, I was planning on getting married. Life was going, I thought, really good, and I was not doing really good. And I'm like, okay, I should really probably think about some of this stuff from my childhood and think about doing something about it. So this was in the early days of the internet, and
Yes,
dating
the early
myself
days.
a little bit. So there were some online resources, but nothing like there is today. And so I'd go and look at stuff about child sexual abuse, and one of the things that always would come up were these narratives about incest survivors who forgive their family. And that seemed like
The thing
that,
to do.
yes.
It seemed like the thing to
Yes,
do.
it did. It seemed like the thing
Like
to
a
do.
pop-up ad. Everybody should shop at Old Navy. Everybody,
Right.
This is just what you do.
Right, and it seemed like that was synonymous with recovery. It seemed like that was the only way to recover. I'm like, okay, I want to get better. I guess I should forgive my family. Well, how the hell do you do that?
You can't.
Well, not throwing them in jail seemed like a good step. And I actually did know that the statute, that I was going to be 23 soon, and this was, okay, once that...
The threshold, right, legal threshold.
Right, so 23rd birthday, I'm like, okay, here's to forgiveness, and the next year...
What a real statement that is, that you're faced with this precipice at this moment, at turning 23, going through all this psychological turmoil, and then on top of that, the juxtaposition of this idea of forgiveness, and then and plus you're the victim, P.S., we keep forgetting about that, and with all of that, you just like sort of like throw it to the wind and say, okay, I'll move on.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be a joy if it was just that easy?
Yeah, well, and then at 24...
Of course, at 24.
At 24, a little girl accused my dad of molesting him. And so legally, there is now, at this point, nothing I could... her case ended up not going to trial, and I understand that. I mean, I know that a lot of cases don't go to trial. This kid was quite young. She was like 7.
Right.
And her parents were divorced, and it was pretty, as I understand it, it was pretty bad, and neither parent, they didn't, each of them thought they had something to gain by keeping it from going to trial.
Everybody vacated. Right, everybody vacated this little girl's cause.
Right, right, exactly.
Everybody decided what was best for everybody else other than her.
Right, and so now I realize it was...
Did you feel guilty?
Enormously.
Because I'm looking at your face, and I sort of sense like you felt guilty.
I did, and it was one of those things I never, looking back on it, I can see, you know, this was a red flag, and this was a red flag, and this was a red flag. He was molesting other kids. But when you're living it, and especially when you don't go out of your way to learn about it, which, I mean, I majored in biochemistry. I was not, I did not expect I would ever be lecturing college kids about how to work with sexual abuse survivors.
Or their perpetrators, for that matter. Or the family members on either side.
Yeah.
Or what do you do when you have a colleague who's having flashback issues and or panic attacks, and you have a group meeting or a PowerPoint presentation, and you say to yourself, what the hell's wrong with this colleague that I have that's carrying on like this, that can't have the door closed, that can't have this, that has all these rules with the boundaries, and you say to yourself, how are we ever going to get this job done? And then you come to terms with, this didn't happen to me, but I see that my colleague is having these stressors, because now I have a heightened awareness of what must have happened to them.
Right.
See, this does impact everybody. A lot of people say, well, this doesn't impact, you know, people other than survivors and their families. Not true. This impacts everybody. This impacts people that you work with. There are some of you that might be doing our lecture cast that have a college roommate that you now start realizing signs and symptoms of what they must have suffered. Or people that drink excessively, or these big binge drinkers out there. There's a story behind everybody's pain. I'm not saying everybody has been traumatized sexually by a family member, but there is a story behind everybody's pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I guess we'll leave off here. Mel and I are going to be taping a few other lecture casts this evening, and we're going to be talking about the politics of crime, which Mel just gave us a marvelous and very unfortunate example about statute of limitations here in New York State. And by the way, I suffered the same issue with statute of limitations, and that's why my stepfather is still running around a free person, and I'm doing all the time there is in the world. You know, it's funny with us victims. We're doing life. We're doing life.
Absolutely.
This is a life sentence for me. And my stepfather's running around drinking, you know, espresso coffees and having a demi-task. You know, good for him. So we're going to talk a little bit about the politics of crime. And we thank you again, Mel. Always a pleasure having you on board here to help talk about these issues, as they're very painful subjects. And so I give us both a lot of credit, as, you know, who knows who's watching these, but the bottom line is that it's a little bit more education than at least we had, because back in our day, aside from the fact that there was no internet, back in our day, people would never have come forth with any of this.
Yeah.
So I wish all of you good night. You got to see more of Mel than of my niece, so that's a good thing. And we wish you safe and to be well always. And good night to you.
Good night, guys.